Well, this week, as you've seen, Eskom's been making the case for its request to the energy regulator, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, Nersa, to be allowed to increase the price you pay for electricity by 20.5%. Remember that the next time you boil your kettle, it's going to cost you more money. The utility says it's got no choice to ask for this increase. There's several reasons for this. There's the cost of coal. There's the cost of employing thousands of workers. There's the cost of starting a proper, independent power producer program. There's also the cost of something relatively new, which is a carbon tax. You also know, of course, and there's been a lot of talk about this over the years, Eskom carrying a debt of nearly 400 billion rand. That's thanks to the construction of Medupi and Kusile. I don't know if we're quite getting value for money from those two power stations, but that's for someone else to answer. But as you can imagine, an increase of 20.5% is going to have an absolutely huge impact on people's lives and how you live. It will also have an impact on municipalities. A major source of their income is what's called the pass-through tariff. You pay a municipality for electricity, they bill Eskom. Well, they pay Eskom. Well, they're supposed to pay Eskom. Tyrone Gray is the mayor of Mogale City. He is, of course, a member of the Democratic Alliance. Professor Sampson Mamphweli, you know him, the energy expert. He directs the Sustainable and Renewable Energy Centre at the University of Stellenbosch. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I really appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, if I may just start with you, what kind of impact do you think a 20.5% increase in electricity prices is going to have on ordinary people?
Well, it's going to be absolutely devastating to household incomes. Already households are constrained severely given what's happened during the lockdown. And from a local government point of view, it will decrease the profitability on electric sales completely. Currently, right now, we are cross-subsidizing the profits we make on electricity by other service delivery items, such as refuge removal, stormwater, roads, etc. This will mean that we will be unable to uphold our constitutional mandates as per Section 152 of the Constitution. Also, I think it's critically unfair to place the burden on residents when this is actually born from governance mismanagement in Eskom utility.
I mean, we all know that the finances of most municipalities are pretty shaky. I imagine Mogale City is no exception. If you suddenly don't make as much money, get as much revenue as you used to, what's going to happen? Will services collapse?
Well, already Mogale City is cash flow constrained, so we need to run an adjustment budget in February and then craft a credible budget for the June adoption for the 1st of July's new budget year. This will unfortunately mean that we need to cut other nice-to-haves and costs and have a very fiscal, prudent municipality. If we are unable to balance the books, it will hamper service delivery, and this has a negative and dire consequence on people's lives.
There are other consequences. I'm going to come to those in a moment. Professor Sampson Mamphweli, good afternoon to you, sir, and I do appreciate your time. You're very generous with it. It's a huge increase, 20.5%. Inflation figures came out yesterday at 5.9%. But the electricity economy, in a way, seems to be a little different from the rest of us. Do you think Eskom can justify this request for such a big increase?
Good evening, Stephen, and the viewers. Yeah, I've looked at the calculations by Eskom. They can justify it, but the question is whether that justification is in itself fair to the consumers, because if you look at aspects that they are using to justify this, the aspects around the construction of Medupi and Kusile with their cost escalations that were almost 3 times or so, that becomes unfair to the consumer because we were not involved as the public on what happened at Medupi and Kusile. So that cost should be passed over to some other people who were involved in what happened there. The cost of IPPs, for instance, the risk mitigation that they have now worked in, that's something that we have been always against. The power ships, for instance, the cost of those things are quite high. Some of us, you remember, Stephen, we advised against those kind of things a long time ago when they were still talking about them before they even talked about contracting. And if you look at the analysis done by Nersa, it's quite shocking because Eskom has requested the 279 billion rands, which is now the 20.5% increase. But there are other issues that are worked into this application by Nersa themselves when they're doing analysis, the regulatory clearing accounts and all those. So the total that we're looking at could be above 50% or just under 50% increase in total in the end. If Eskom gets this 20% plus the regulatory clearing account of about 10-point-something billion rand that they've applied for. And there was that mistake by Nersa way back in the 2019-2020 financial year, where they made a mistake and put in the 46 billion or so as revenue that was coming from government as a bailout. And that money needs to be recovered in the current financial year going forward. So the escalation is going to be quite massive. And I agree that the impact on the consumer is going to be very, very, very big.
Professor, there was a comment, I think it might have been made, in fact, yesterday. I saw a report suggesting that Eskom said to Nersa that the price of electricity in South Africa is still relatively cheap. Now, there's history here, because before 2000, and let's call it 2007, I think it's common cause. I think we can accept that the price of electricity was very cheap. There were reasons for that. After 2008, the price of electricity really has started to go up very dramatically. It's now 11, 12, 13 years later, and electricity costs a lot more. In global terms, is electricity, I mean, can Eskom really say electricity is still cheap?
Electricity is slightly cheap in South Africa, but it's not necessarily where it should be. You will recall that when way back then, the electricity in South Africa was heavily subsidized, and that was mainly to encourage investments into the country. So industry was paying quite low so that they can then invest into the economy and create the much needed jobs. Like you rightly said, the electricity price has gone up quite steeply, and it continues to go up. And we are anticipating that it's going to continue beyond this current financial year. It's going to be much, much, much higher. So and if you look at some of the developing countries, some of them, the electricity price is still quite low. And one of the biggest issues that we need to resolve quickly as a country is the aging infrastructure at Eskom. Because if you look at some of these costs, they are associated with the cost of what they call irregular or unplanned maintenance on the Eskom's coal power stations. The energy availability factors of those power stations is very, very low, hovering around 60% instead of above 72%. And that has got a huge, huge implication on the cost, because for the remainder of the time that the power stations are not available, Eskom needs to rely on pumping cycle gas turbines and burn diesel, which is quite expensive. And if you look closely at their current application, that has got also a massive implication on the electricity price hike that they are requesting.
Mr. Mayor, there are other things that happen in municipalities too. So if we listen to Professor Mamphweli and the complexity of this, and I think complexity, it doesn't even begin to get to it. But if the price of electricity goes up by so much, we know that illegal connections are a major problem. I mean, look at how many areas in South Africa undergo load reduction, where Eskom actually switches them off to protect the transformers. I'm sure this happens in Mogale City too. So that means that people will be taking electricity and not paying for it. And the incentive to do that will increase if power prices increase. How much of a problem will that be for you?
Oh, there'll be a massive problem. We also have a massive problem with Zamas in Mogale City. So these are illicit miners, and they also tap into our electrical infrastructure, either by stealing cables or doing Izinyoka connections. I believe that we can't just simply throw Eskom to the wolves. The issues that the Eskom is also dealing with is because of a systemic lack of holistic governance. We need SAPS to play an active role in securing the electrical distribution network. We need the energy minister to ensure that we can bring on more independent power producers on board. We also need to ensure that we can incentivize renewable energy costs. There's no reason why we can't start looking at waste-to-energy cycles and reclaiming our landfill sites, creating energy as well as protecting the environment.
So would you be interested, as Mogale City, in pursuing contracts with independent power producers? In other words, cutting Eskom out completely?
Well, I've actually already gauged I've been less than 2 months in, and we've facilitated proposals of over 10 billion rands worth of investment. We'll be able to generate 100 megawatts from solar and then another 72 megawatts from waste to energy. It also has the added benefit of creating clean water and hydrogen, so we can also run taxis via conversion. This will also decrease the cost for transport in our area. And this means that we can technically, within perhaps 24 months, if everything goes smoothly, we currently use 120 megawatts a month from Eskom. Given 100 plus 72, we'll have enough capacity to go off-grid if everything goes smoothly.
I mean, that would be incredible. I mean, 200 megawatts, to put it another way, if you just sold all of that to Joburg, there would never be load shedding in Joburg. I mean, that's the amount of electricity that we're talking about. That's quite a large amount. Is it really possible to do that? And there's a sort of rider to that question, which is the energy minister would have to let you do it.
This is true, hence why I said it should be a holistic engagement. We can't expect Eskom and Nersa to solve all the issues in isolation. Government must stop this tendency of behaving like they operate in silos. We're all in this together, so we should all operate together, and all the departments should come together to solve our energy crisis.
Professor Mamphweli, I mean, what's so interesting about this is that it is not just Mogale City. Ekurhuleni, which is was an ANC council. Look at me being a little bit behind the times. But Ekurhuleni, even under the mayoralship of Mzwandile Messina at the time, wanted to pursue contracts with independent power producers. So, Professor Mamphweli, if this happens, and the incentive for councils to do this, we know Cape Town, of course, will want to do it. If that happens, what happens to Eskom? It never gets fixed, and it's still got, I think it's 378 billion rands worth of debt.
Yes, most municipalities are looking at buying directly from IPPs. Stellenbosch municipality, where I'm sitting, we as the university, we are assisting them with studies to look at what can they do within their municipality so that they can be independent of the grid. And it's not only municipalities. If you look at the mining sector, for instance, the mines are one of the big consumers of electricity, and they are the big payers. The mines and the municipalities, they pay a lot of money to Eskom. There's quite a number of requests that we're getting from mines. Some of them have already started with environmental impact assessment so that they can start producing their own electricity. So this basically, in the long run, it's going to kind of kill Eskom off, because Eskom will be left with whatever generation capacity that they cannot provide electricity to anyone apart from the regular household people. And people as well, at household level, we're starting to see more and more uptake of things such as solar PV without battery storage, especially in big metros. And some are also including battery storage in their solar home systems because of the reliability. Most people are starting to be irritated by the reliability aspects of Eskom power supply, because every now and then you hear about load shedding, and now they've got this new thing called load reduction. I was listening to you in another platform in the morning while I was driving here, and I had one caller talking about load reduction in their area, saying electricity just disappears for an hour and we don't know what is happening. So those kind of things are pushing businesses and private individuals to look at alternative ways of going off the grid. I'm quite encouraged when I listen to the municipality saying they are also looking into bioenergy as well as things such as your biogas, because those are some of the things that were overlooked in the past, but with the higher electricity prices, they are becoming more and more attractive.
Professor, I mean, it would seem the only solution then for Eskom, and I know people talk about a utility spiral, you know, that the idea that with de-networking and all sorts of other things happening, not just in South Africa but in other countries, that entities like Eskom just won't exist in 20 years' time. But it would seem to me the quickest way for Eskom to sort of manage this is to produce its own solar power and to do it quickly. If it were to do that, and I mean, I don't know what that means for Kusile and Medupi, But that would possibly be the only way, because you can get a solar power plant up and running in under 2 years, I understand. Again, you'd need the minister's approval for that. But if Eskom were to do that very quickly, it stands a chance of saving itself. If it doesn't, what's going to happen?
Yes, Eskom needs to quickly move to renewables. We're looking more on the solar systems as well as your wind power. But my biggest worry, with Eskom is that, in my view, in the next 10 to 15, towards 20 years, if Eskom does not concentrate on the transmission and distribution, Eskom is going to die a slow death. In my view, Eskom should start looking at this issue of unbundling and then privatizing generation completely, and then concentrate on the distribution and transmission business. That's where Eskom can have a competitive advantage, because they can't compete with independent power producers on the transmission and distribution, but the independent power producers can take them off the market if they are concentrating on the generation side of things. And if I have to quickly go back to history, Stephen, we know that electricity generation was started by independent power producers in Kimberley, powering the mines long time ago, and then there was the expropriation of those assets in the interest, basically, of the public, with the view that electricity prices will be lower. And now we're seeing electricity prices going the other way, which means that we need to relook at whether Eskom should play in the business of producing power, or they must only play in the business of transmission and distribution.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that might well happen in terms of decisions made both by businesses and individuals with means, so let's say middle class and richer individuals, households, is that the provision of electricity will be a competitive advantage. If you, as a municipality, are able to say we will not have load shedding, businesses are going to move towards you. If Cape Town and Mogale City, where you are the mayor, are able to sign deals with independent power producers and ensure that there's never load shedding, all sorts of people will move there. If you don't do that, people are going to move away from you. How worried are you about a dynamic like that playing out? Because what that can also do is it can mean that certain areas, and I think we see this in Soweto, for example, people move away from areas that don't have electricity, and these areas are left in the dark.
Exactly. So there are some areas in Kagiso, Swaneville, St. Kombile, that haven't had power since June last year. Eskom simply removed or defused the transformers, and this blanket approach causes devastation amongst our community in terms of healthcare, as well as the ability to pull yourself up and get yourself into the economy. It's impossible to expect someone to search for a job when you don't even have anything to charge a phone with, let alone have a warm bath. And it is 100% true. It will give you a competitive advantage. So the advantage with solar is that the sun doesn't charge us for photons, and if anyone's noticed that. So it means the long-term stability and cost of electricity start panning out. So the proposal that I was furnished with from an American company partnering with Germany was to say that they will be able to supply stable electricity for 25 years at 2 Rand a kilowatt. In 25 years' time, at 2 Rand a kilowatt, I don't know what Eskom will be charging, but I don't think it will be 2 Rand a kilowatt.
That would be a complete game changer. I mean, Professor Mamphweli, we're going to see more offers like that. I mean, I remember, and I think I've suggested this to you before, but as a joke years ago, I said we should just give everyone, in those areas of Soweto, a solar panel, and at least they'll have electricity during the day. Suddenly, the maths is pointing in that way.
Yes. You'll recall that the biggest cost driver with things such as solar and wind was the fact that because they are variable, we need some form of storage. And we've been looking at storage systems. For instance, over the years, the cost of storage systems is going down, and then that means that solar energy then becomes attractive. Wind energy becomes attractive. I've seen so many shopping malls, for instance, that are starting to install big battery storage systems up to 10 megawatts. And some of them are using them as a buffer during load shedding. Instead of running generators, then they can take from their battery storage systems. So we're going to be seeing a move more towards solar energy. We're going to see a move more towards wind energy technologies. Our own energy plan, the Integrated Resource Plan 2019, has got a provision of up to 2,600 megawatts of storage, and that has been put in 2026. So one of the things that we're saying as people in the space is that why don't we bring that forward, and then it can assist us, during load shedding, because our problem is that it's not that we don't have enough capacity. We have enough generation capacity that we lose every now and then when the systems are down, especially coal power stations that are very old. So we need to bring that forward, the battery storage aspect forward, and we need to bring in new generation capacity as quickly as possible.
Mr. Mayor, there's a whole process that Nersa is going to go through, and I know you, and I think it's, for some reason, maybe it's just coincidence, every mayor who comes from the Democratic Alliance is saying roughly the same thing. I don't really believe in coincidences in politics. But Nersa is also prescribed by legislation. There's a formula. It's actually an international formula about how you work out what a power price should be. So the chances are, I don't think Eskom will get 20.5%, but they will get quite a high and a significant increase. What are you going to do after that? I mean, you won't be able to do anything in the short term.
Indeed, we won't be able to do anything in the short term. Our hands will be tied, and worse than that, if a local municipality doesn't have any built-up surpluses to cushion the blow, it will be directly translated to the residents.